In the past seminar, I present my book chapter in Mini-Minor Communication book, an intent for serious application of cognitive semiotics into specific fields. In this case, the field of industrial design or design in general. I used the framework, the theoretical framework that was produced in Colombia, and it's called agentive semiotics. And agentive semiotics is strongly based on cognitive semiotics perspectives, and in another fields, for example, psychology and neuroscience, like we will going to see today in logic, in practical logic from Gavai and Woods in the second part of the seminar, to introduce in a better way in the theoretical aspects that support the application of semiotics into design field. It's a huge subject, of course, because the reference used by agentive semiotics is extremely large and huge. I choose one of the primary theoretical background that agentive semiotics has. That is the practical logic of cognitive systems. Practical Logic of Cognitive Systems is a book from Don Gavai and John Woods. They give definitions from the logic perspective about what is an agent and what is agency and what is an agenda, and the notion of agenda relevance. We are going to study this subject in the second part of the seminar today, because another very interesting discussion that we did in the last seminar is about the notion of artifacts or artefacts. This is the first part of our seminar today, in order to deal, I think, or to give another alternative to the use of the word object that is more popular, I think. In my book in Spanish, I try to do an explanation that's why it's important to do a theoretical distinction between artifacts, the notion of artifacts, and the notion of object. The artifact definition in my subject, design semiotics, is from Hilpinen in the first time, and now another author make or did an explanation about the notion of artifacts. And the first definition, the definition that I used in the book is: artifacts is an object that has been intentionally made for some purpose. It establishes a difference between natural object and artificial object in an Aristotelical way. But the interesting thing is why we use the word object instead of artifacts. In my knowledge, at least, in America, in Colombia, in my community, from design and even from other fields, they prefer use the term object. I have not statistics about it, but the people always prefer in my community, academic community, use the term object. We could have object in the main level, and artifact is a kind of object that has been intentionally made with an identified author. Then we have another kind, a specific group of artifacts. For example, a cutlery. Between the cutlery, I have the knife. This is a categorization, but I have another hypothesis or presuppositions about it. It's only the presupposition that the preferential use of the word object is by habituation, simply habituation, for example, in my country. And another possible explanation is because it's a kind of rhetoric use of the term object. It's a kind of synecdoche or metonymia, whole part of whole, because it's easy to us deal with this kind of term. So that is the reason to use the term object. In this case, synecdoche or metonymia. Our goal is obtain cognitive economy. It's still easy with the concepts of these three options: habituation, rhetoric, figures like metonymia or synecdoche, or the use of categorization could be explanation for the use for the preferential use of object.
Interesting question, really. Why should we use artifact instead? Or,
I think it's... No, sorry, interrupting you. But I think really, when you talk about cognitive economy in organization theory today, you can see people are overwhelmed, so they try to keep things away because they don't have enough cognitive power. But you can also see organizations creating terminology in order to be very investing with the cognitive capacity of the organization. So they go down the road and they just lose everything and they start to copy other companies and they can't think by themselves. Or you see people actually creating real artifacts in that way, in an arty way of seeing what they are doing as design, for example, or the way you have your culture in your organization. So it's but it's strange that they don't accept the fact artifact as the word, because it's also an organizational theory with Edgar Schein. You understand culture by understanding the artifact. So it's a common knowledge in a lot of people knowing organizational theory and management what an artifact is, but they actually do not use it. Everyone, this is so common knowledge, it's so mainstream. No one uses it in practical work.
Yes.
So it's really, your observation is really on the nose, so to say.
Yes, it's a good question. I try to answer this
I
question.
think it's a very nice word. I use it often.
Yes, yes. I am not
Actually, I started using it because in semiotics for a long time there was a generalization from language, so everything was supposed to be a text. And I think that's tend to treat everything, every semiotics resource as being of the same kind as language, which is misleading. So I started using artifact instead. And of course, these are not only well, he talks about that too, not only objects which are clearly material like this, but also language, for example, is an artifact.
Is it intentionally created for a purpose?
In a way, yes. The level of intentionality can be more or less advanced.
But it's important to make this distinction in all the paper. Intentionality refers only to have a purpose to do something, not is the concept of philosophical concept of intentionality. In my book, I use another interesting reference that is called is from Visser, and a book that is called Cognitive Artifacts. And the cognitive artifacts are intangible artifacts that we use to think. For example, maps, drawings, models, formulas, and representations. They are cognitive artifacts.
And just right when you said intangible, and then he gets drawing diagrams, so they can be very tangible, right?
Yes.
A cognitive artifact can be a very tangible, specific map. But so what makes an artifact a cognitive artifact?
The example is the following. For example, a writer have a concept of his work in his mind, and this concept, this creation, this concept, this idea is a cognitive artifact because it's a creation of him. In a concept work, a concept creation, for example, an artistic creation or a novel, is a kind of cognitive artifacts, and these artifacts could become or becomes into tangible artifacts when the writer write a manuscript of his concept work. It's not the best example of an artifact, but it's, in a certain way, it's an artifact because accomplish different propositions of what is an artifact. For example, in the way of creative thinking,
But I wondered who was talking about cognitive, because he quotes it, who invented the notion of cognitive artifacts.
Is when, for example, the people walk in a forest without the intention to create a path, but another people begins to see the path and begin to use this path, becomes in artifact, because they are using this path with certain purpose.
Right.
This is another example. I connect with this with one of our our assertion that is the purpose of the agent that gives the status of artifacts, of the status of science, or the status of usability to the things that, like I said in the last seminar, it's not depends of the way that the object or this artifact was created. Depends of the purpose of the users, of the purpose of the agents. Maybe the authors of this path have not intention to create a path, but an agent see the path and use. There is another interesting example in the natural objects and different kinds of natural objects that we could become in artifacts in different ways. For example, we put a trunk of a tree between two rocks in order to create a bridge without modify the shape of the stick and the rocks. In this moment, this object becomes in artifacts.
I think when you open that door with the variable degrees, you also come to a problem with an optimum level, right? Because in art, in mannerism, you can lose it all if it's too artifactually. But that will open another gap, to say, degrees
of
how do they
artificiality.
interact in different variables.
It's the Klein problem, right? Like if you say that everything is a Klein, then you don't solve much.
You don't
either.
solve it.
Yes,
You just open
yeah.
the next problem.
Yes.
But I still think it's very useful because
I think we can have
the
a
level
prototype of artifacts, and we can have different more or less artifactual things around.
Yes, I think it depends of the conditions that we use to compare what is an artifact or not. If we take the first condition introduced in the text, you put there different kinds of objects that satisfy this condition. But if you begin to introduce another conditions, you obtain another classification, and so on. And that is that's why maybe that the author finished this paragraph in this manner. It's a partial classification, depends on this condition of comparison to the notion of artifacts. Because we have not forget that it's an encyclopedic entry. So the encyclopedia try to meet different reference in order to be fair with different approach to the notion of artifacts, and try to meet in this entry the different approach of different authors trying to define artifacts.
So then we should go to agency.
Yes.
The other side.
Yes, that is even more complex. But it's interesting for me as well. We are going to discuss a little bit about the agency and agent notion from the perspective of the Don Gavaya, John Woods. Is the primary basis of agentive semiotics, some of their ideas. We have discussion about some points, but the way that they explain the notion of agency, we agree with them.
But I think there is an important difference between what you had said about agents, and I think already Douglas knew too, and what they say, because even a machine or an institution is an agent to them.
Yes, here is put in this way, but they say that it's a kind of theoretical